Now, there are some other things with zoning ordinances I want to talk about, and mainly, most of the time, what you will see with zoning ordinances, or the way they create zoning, they try, and I emphasize the word try, because there are many, many cases where you see this doesn't happen because of the growth is maybe different than they thought it was going to be, or it was much faster. But what they try to do is feather the zoning, okay? And what I mean by that is, if you see a lot of intersections where there's like a stoplight, most of the zoning right on the corner is a commercial type zoning. Gas station, convenience store, things like that. As they go further out, you might see an office building behind them. And then behind that, apartment complex. And then behind that, single family homes. What they're trying to do is create a distance between where people live and where a lot of activity is taking place. They call that a buffer zone or buffering. They try and do this a lot. And that is just so that you're not living on US 31, which does happen, okay? Let me give you a great example. Got to really be a South Sider to understand this, and it's only because I'm pretty good with this. When you guys know where Mrs. Curls is? Oh, yeah. That old, it's an ice cream store. Miguel's like, oh yeah, I know where that's at. They got me on speed dial. I didn't go for 3 days. They called me to see if I was okay. Yeah. So that's Old Madison, right? Or Old Main, Old Meridian. There's houses on Old Meridian. Across the street, you have got a park, you've got a library, you've got a school, and then on the other side of that is Madison, where there's a lot of traffic. That center zoning area is a great example, because here's what happens. All of those things I just mentioned, the park, the library, the school, are all busy during what time of the day? During the day, when people are not typically at home. But in the evening, when people are at home, typically those are shut down and there's no activity going, so it buffers all of the traffic from Madison into the homes, because all that distance right there where the park, the library, and the schools are. You got a what? A barbershop that's pretty busy. Would that be yours? It's called Main Street Barbershop. Well, we've got it on recording. It's called Main Street. Yeah, and he'll give 10% off if you just say you heard it on the recording on Main Street. He'll give 90% off. No. in the audio. Yeah. So that's an idea of how buffering works. Now, like I said, things change. Sometimes they guess wrong in their plan. Sometimes the public grows differently than what they guessed, and you end up with like 31 where those houses are. But they try to not put in an industrial building right beside a residential housing addition. All right? Once again, we go back to that, well, that's going to lower the value. So they try and buffer it by smoothing it out. You might see a C5 or 6 on the corner, then you go to a C2, then you go to an R20, and then an R1, so that they're not right on the corner. And that is through a temperance of zoning. Please do not argue that the constitutional right is my property, will do with it all I want under the 14th Amendment. There have been many court cases like that. You will not win. All right? Because remember, this is for the betterment of the public, and zoning is not really there to keep you from making a living or doing something. It's there to protect someone else. They are looking out for others, not you. And they are looking out for you so that your neighbor doesn't do the same thing. That's what this whole thing deals with. Now, if you want to change, you have to get a zoning, well, all zoning works through permits. And there are 3 specific permits I want to talk about. The first permit is called a non-conforming use. A non-conforming use permit. A non-conforming use permit allows someone who has been using the property in one zoning to continue using that property in that zoning manner, even though the zoning around them has changed. Clear as mud. Let me give you the best example. Once again, let's go back to those houses on 31. Houses that were along 31, there by the Walmart and the IHOP and the Hooters and all that, were at one time houses. People lived in them. All right? The city determined after so long that those would probably be better used as commercial property. And hence, that's why you see you've got a Raymond James stockbroker in there, you got 2 or 3 real estate brokers, there's a dentist, a doctor. However, there are still 2 people that live there. They still reside there. So they were, when the city changed that residential zoning strip to commercial, they can't make those 2 people move. So what they did is they changed the zoning to commercial and then granted those 2 people non-conforming use permits. Think of it as grandfathered. They were grandfathered in. They were using it as a house, which was the legal way to use it. Then the city changed the zoning on them. Wasn't their fault. They get to maintain that use as a residence through this non-conforming use. Because you cannot live in a commercially zoned property unless you have this non-conforming use. So what they said is, okay, we're going to change all these houses to commercial so we could put these businesses in, but I understand you live there, so we're going to grant you this permit that says you can live in that property as long as you want under residential. Until one of 2 things happen. The house gets destroyed by an act of God, which that's not really ever the case. God will never do that to you, but that's what they put. Or you sell the property to be used as the current zoning and then it goes away. So if one of those houses were to, say, sell their house and go, hey, I could probably get a better deal to a dentist, so they sell it to a dentist who's commercial, boom, non-conforming use gone. All right? And it can never come back. But they can sell it as a house to someone else that wants to use it as a house. All right? That non-conforming permit will be grandfathered in. So basically, the way that I always think of it is, you look different, but you are actually the right one. You were there first. Everybody else changed around you. You would be granted a non-conforming use. Now, if you want to change your current zoning, you have to go in front of the Board of Appeals or the zoning board. And this is a whole extensive process to do this, by the way. You have to tell everybody you go and having a meeting. You have to give them a chance to come yell at you. That's called remonstration. You have to personally invite people that touch your property, all kinds of things, and you go in front of the zoning board and you tell them why you want this zoning, and they listen, and then they listen to the other people that say why you shouldn't get the zoning, and then the Board of Appeals makes a judgment. There are 2 major changes that you can get. The first one I want to talk about is called a variance. No, let's not do it that way. Let's do it the other way. Let's talk about the conditional use permit. The conditional use permit now allows you to change from everything around you based on the fact that it is allowable in that area. But currently it's not that. So you live in a housing addition and you want to open a barber shop in your garage. You would seek a conditional use that would allow you to do a commercial product out of a residential area, or a daycare, or a house of worship. You would seek a conditional use. The conditional use is person specific and action specific. Meaning if you're granted the conditional use to cut hair, you can't all of a sudden go, oh, I want to be a dog groomer. After all, that's just cutting hair on a dog. They're going to go, no, that's a different use. And if I have the conditional use permit and I sell the property to John, John has to seek the conditional use for him. It doesn't translate. So that's called a conditional use permit. The next one is a variance. A variance is not really a change so much as you want to alter something that's, and kind of leave it there. The most common variance you see is what they call a setback variance. In Marion County, you cannot build a house within 10 feet of the property line. All right, that's so they can add a sewer or sidewalk to the front of your house. That's so they can put power lines down the side and get an easement. Things like that. It's called a setback. All right? Suppose you want to build a big garage because you collect cars and your new garage plan shows your garage going all the way to the property line and touching it. Before you could build that, you would have to go in front of the zoning board and go, hey, I want a variance of that 10 feet. And here's why I want it. You have to give a specific reason and cause. I want it to build this garage so that I can store my classic Corvettes in from the weather. I don't want to get rid of it. I don't want to change it. I'm just varying a standard that's in place. Sonia could have sought a variance of the aesthetic zoning and said, I can't afford to put that roof back, can I put 3-tap shingles? And went in front and sought a variance of the aesthetic zoning. They probably wouldn't have given it to her, but she could have at least asked. So the way to look at this is, the first one is called a non-conforming use. You look different, but everybody changed around you. A conditional use permit, you look different because you sought out the change. I wanted to open a daycare in my garage. And then a variance is just an alteration of a standard that's already in place, and you just want to manipulate it a little bit. Now we're going to change the audio file. Staying with the same slide getting to look kind of boring.